Good evening, darlings and deviants. My name is Lucy, and I'm just a little loony. And welcome to another episode of Tools of the Tirade, the show where I give you the tools you need to power up your commander decks. Today we'll be going over mana acceleration again, but this time we're going to start focusing on specific colors, so in the traditional order, we will be starting with white, specifically mono white ramp, since it can slot into any deck that has white in its color identity. Unfortunately, the card pool is pretty thin, but I managed to dig up over 10 unique cards. So guess what? We're making another top 10 list. And look, it's the best way to organize the chaotic maelstrom of thoughts in my brain into a vague resemblance of cohesion, so just go with me on this, okay? Starting at number 10, we have Legion's Landing. Okay, let me explain. Legion's Landing is a 1-mana legendary enchantment that comes with a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink when it enters the battlefield. In addition, when you attack with 3 creatures, it transforms into a land. Adanto the First Fort is a legendary land that you can tap for a white. See, it sort of ramps you. Attacking with 3 creatures is pretty trivial in a lot of decks, especially when Legion's Landing gets you a third of the way there. Plus, it has more text. For 2 and a white, you can tap the First Fort in order to make a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Good for token decks, vampire decks, an okay blocker. You shouldn't really underestimate a token generator on a land. Legion's Landing is stretching what ramp is, but, well, despite Wizards printing a bunch of cool ways to ramp in white, finding good, unique effects for it is pretty rough. So I had to stretch the definition a little bit. Don't worry, it gets more concrete from here. Number 9 is Core Cartographer. Core Cartographer is 4 mana for a 2/2 Core Scout that, when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Plains card, put onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your deck. It's just a worse Wood Elves. A really, really bad Wood Elves. However, white has a lot of blinking effects or ways to double enter the battlefield abilities, so Core Cartographer, while a bit slow at 4 mana, gets more useful the more of these effects that get printed, and it can search up a non-basic plains as well, something that's pretty rare in mono white ramp. Number 8 is Restoration of Iganjo. This card is 2 and a white for an enchantment saga that has 3 chapters. Chapter 1, which you'll use when it comes into play, is that you search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put into your hand, and then shuffle. Spoiler alert, I'm not counting cards that add lands to your hand as ramp. No tithe, no land tax, so this isn't why this card is on the list. Stay with me though, we'll get to the actual ramp soon. Chapter 2 lets you discard a card. When you do, return target permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. There it is. You can discard that plains you just searched up in order to put it right onto the battlefield tapped. However, you can also return any permanent, so it's not only a ramp piece, which is why I like it so much. And finally, on Chapter 3, you exile and transform the saga into Architect of Restoration, a 3/4 enchantment creature fox monk with vigilance that lets you make a 1/1 colorless spirit token each time you block or attack with it, both of which are pretty easy to do when it has a nice butt and it has vigilance. I love when my cards can do multiple things, and the Restoration of Iganjo does just that. Number 7 is Master of Ceremonies. This is 3 and a white for a 3/4 Rhino Druid. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent chooses money, friends, or secrets. Each person who chooses money gets a treasure, each person who chooses friends gets a 1/1 citizen token, and each person who chooses secrets gets to draw a card. The best part? You get all 3 effects. But wait, Miss Lucy, isn't this isn't ramp? What if no one picks money? That's an excellent question, random person. However, you're either getting a bunch of 1/1s, extra cards, or extra mana. No matter what your opponents choose, you're getting the most out of it every time your upkeep comes around. In addition, it can, by itself, keep both you and itself in the game, because your opponents can always use more money, more friends, and or more secrets, and each time they don't remove it or you're sitting back and accruing sweet, sweet value. I love me a Master of Ceremonies. No bias at all. Number 6 is Deep Gnome Terramancer. For 1 and a white, you get a 2/2 gnome wizard with flash that has Mold Earth. Whenever one or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, You may search your library for a Plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Do this only once each turn, though. This card is great because of the flash. Your opponent plays and cracks a fetch land, flash in the Terramancer and ramp. The next opponent casts the Rampant Growth, you get another land. DGT here can potentially ramp you 3 or 4 times in a game with little effort on your part. So why is he so low on the list? Well, for the reasons he's so good, honestly. He relies on your opponents doing things to ramp out, and if they don't, he's just a 2-mana 2/2, and that's not amazing, honestly. I love this card, and I play him a lot in a lot of white decks, but he's not guaranteed ramp, so he's further down this list. Number 5 is 3 cards, because they have very similar effects, do similar things. They're the main way that Wizards gives us white ramp, and honk you, I do what I want. The 3 cards are Knight of the White Orchid, Space Marine Scout, Loyal Warhound, and that's it. There's more effects like this, but these are the 3 best ones in my opinion. They all have different keywords, mana costs, and power and toughness, but they're all on here because they have the same ability. If an opponent has more lands than you when they come into play, you may search your deck for a Plains and put it onto the battlefield, specifically a basic Plains most of the time. Space Marine Scout has more abilities, but the land enters tapped. Knight of the White Orchid needs 2 white pips, but the land comes into play untapped and can be any Plains, like the Scout. The Warhound puts only a basic Plains into play, tapped, but it is a very good boy and has the highest power of the 3. These are sort of the poster children for white-based ramp, and they help you catch up. Keep this tip in mind if you're going first, though. Say you have 2 lands in play, and the person who went before you has 3. You instinctively go to play your 3rd land. Hold up. Listen to the silly girl in the top hat. Keep that land and play one of these boys, let's say the Knight. Go get a land from your deck, putting you on parity with your opponent. Then play a land, putting you ahead. Watch out for opportunities like this and be sure not to miss them. Number 4 is more of a draw spell than a ramp spell, but it counts for this list. Smuggler's Share is 2 and a white for an enchantment that, at the end of each turn, lets you draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn, and lets you create a treasure token for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter play. Just like the deep-known Terramancer, this card needs your opponents to do things, but it triggers all the fetch lands and draws you cards, which gives this one the edge. As long as your opponents are ramping, this will give you some treasures and cards to keep up with the rest of them. Number 3 is our Chaomancer's Map. For 2 and a white, you would get an artifact that, when it comes into play, you search up 2 basic Plains and put them into your hand. Then it sticks around, letting you put a land from play into the battlefield whenever an opponent plays a land. That's insane! It's basically a burgeoning in white. What's the downside? Well, you can only play the land if they have more lands than you, so it's not just a burgeoning. But it's still pretty great. It makes sure that you're keeping up with any land ramp your opponents may have. Number 2 is Pearl Medallion, the simplest ramp on here. For 2 mana, you get an artifact that says your white spells cost 1 generic mana less. Simple, sweet, and to the point. If the rest of this list was any indication, White's ramp is a little lacking in terms of permanent mana sources, so an effect like this is in high demand. Plus, you can use stuff like the Restoration of Iganjo and any number of other things that let you return permanents with mana value 2 or less to the battlefield to basically make this out for 0 mana. That's just some extra value. Number 1 is the creme de la creme of white ramp, and honestly it's an auto-include in most white decks nowadays. It's Smothering Tithe. For 3 and a white, you get an enchantment that says, whenever an opponent draws a card, they may pay 2 generic mana. If they don't, you create a treasure token. Seems simple, right? And it is. But it's amazing. If your opponents only draw their first card for the turn, you're getting 3 treasures or heavily impeding their turn. 2 mana is a lot to pay for each card, and if someone plays a draw spell, you'll be looking like the art on the card in no time, throwing up coins and value and all these fancy treasures, casting your big bombs. Oh, this card's really good. I really like it. And that'll be it. There's a few ways to ramp out your white decks and make them more powerful. Hopefully, armed with this knowledge, you'll be able to head into battle with a more robust ramp suite for those mono white decks of yours. Don't be stuck just playing colorless mana ramp. Try some of these fancy ones out. Did I miss a cool card? Do you think my list should be in a different order? Do you think top 10 lists are silly? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, while you're there, Give me a like and subscribe in order to appease the ancient deity Algorithmus. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, au revoir.